Hey guys, this is Hans Gusen for 6plusholdem.com, and today we are doing a session review of a student of mine. We are playing No Limit 100 on Pokerstars, 2 tables as you can see. So let's just jump into the action here. Table number 1 is the left one, table number 2 is the right one. So on table number 1 we have pocket 9s and go for the limp call. This is fairly easy. The raise was pot size here. On this board we are basically giving up. Even if we have an open ender, it is very hard to continue, especially the king is not a clean out given that the ace makes a bigger straight. Now that the opponent raised preflop, checked flop, check turn, this is a very marginal value bet, I would say. It's really hard to get value from worse hands. I don't think that a hand like king queen will call us here, so yeah, I would probably go for the check and then either fold or call river to a bet. However, some people on these stakes are just huge stations and will call you here with 2 pair. So I don't mind a bet here actually. Table number 2, I like the raise against the min bet. We can definitely represent a jack here. This is interesting. Now this guy clicks it back. My first intention is to fold here because usually the population is not doing that as a bluff. So we will run into a jack here most of the time. However, given the odds, this might actually be a profitable call, given that we have implieds if we hit a king. We also do have a backdoor flush draw. So yeah, we are basically getting 1 to 6 almost. So I think you could go for the call here, but I don't mind folding as well. Jack 10, you can go for the raise, you could go for the call. If I decide to raise, I would go all in here. I don't like a pot 3 bet. And on this flop we are supposed to give up, given that we play against 4 opponents. This is an easy fold. Queen 8 on the button, we have to call given the odds. Now it's an easy fold, of course. I will actually go a bit faster, since we can then skip the not so interesting spots. You can see this footage is 30 minutes. This is actually the first part. There will be another part of this session. I think we can go for even a bit faster speed. And then I will pause whenever there is an interesting hand. Queen Jack on table number 2, easy limp. We will also defend this hand against a raise. On 7-7-9, not much we can do. We have to check fold here. Table number 1, 8-9 suited, definitely limp that under the gun. And again, on this board, we are just supposed to give up. We do have a gut shot, but there is a flush possible. So the fold is probably the right play on the turn, even though the odds were amazing. So you can see this is no limit 100. On table number 1 we have 3 fish. I'm pretty sure that green is the color for recreational players, and 2 unknowns. And on table number 2 we have 2 recreationals and 1 rec and 2 unknowns. Pocket kings here, we limp under the gun, face a very small ISO raise from the hijack and 2 flat calls. At this point we definitely want to go all in with pocket kings. Fairly standard. When you are like 100 antes deep or 150 antes deep, there is no like 3 betting that is non all in, given that the equities run super close, and you also don't want to play pocket kings in a pot out of position basically. Table number 2, this is a limp pot if I remember correctly, and then we went for the bet on the flop and the bet on the turn. Fairly standard. The 9 on the river, easy check back. He can definitely have some straights now. No value in a bet. There's nothing worse that could call us. So yeah, well played. King 10, my default would be to limp behind here. I don't like a ISO with that hand. King 10 suited, I mix in sometimes an ISO raise, but I think King 10 offsuit is just a garbage hand which should not be raised. In terms of raise sizings, you can just use something between 100 to 150% pot size. Basically depends on your game plan and also the VPIP of the opponent, the skill level of the opponent basically does also affect your raise size. We flopped the nuts. You could go for a bet. If I decide to bet, I would bet like 1/3 pot size here. Check back is obviously fine. We are hoping that he picks up a full house. The turn, I prefer a call actually. I think we will make him fold too many hands. Also, there are many like possible gut shots he could have, so we want him to improve. So I would just call the turn here. There's no point in raising. I don't think that we will ever get called here if we raise, even if we click back. Okay, this is pretty crazy. So we actually get it in on a turn against ace-9. I guess if the opponents are this bad, then it doesn't really matter whether you call or raise the turn. Money will eventually go in anyways. But any decent player would fold a 9 there. Queen 10, table number 1, this is an easy call, even against the min raise. You can basically consider min raises being limps. On this board, I like the fold. If you are heads up in this situation, you could go for a float. There are a couple of turns that we can continue on and also bluff on. But three-way, given that we had one player sitting behind, I think the fold is correct. Six-8 on table number 2 against the cutoff open was an easy fold. Here we have ace-10 offsuit. We are in the cutoff against a regular on the button. I like both options here. We can either limp or raise. Basically, this also depends on your game plan, whether you have a raising range or only a limping range in the cutoff. You obviously can also have both. Just a question on how you balance that. The button checks behind and we flop an open ender. You can go for the bet, you can also go for the check call. I'm leaning towards a bet though, since we will make him fold out better hands and we also deny equity. King Queen, we open raise, pretty standard. So far, not that many interesting spots actually. Beside the King 10 hand maybe, where we flopped quads. Seven, 8 on table number 2, we defended against a small open raise. The preflop aggressor now bets 1/3 pot size. I think this is a fairly easy call. We do have the gut shot to the nuts here, so you can definitely call in position given the odds. On the turn we have an easy fold. Ace 10 offsuit here, I would fold, given that we have 2 more players sitting behind who could both be limp raising. Also, we are not super happy defending Ace 10 offsuit against the raise. King 10 suited on table number 2. This is a easy limp call, especially against that sizing. Now that actually the under the gun player did limp jam, we have to fold this hand. On table number 1, we actually limped with 6-7 offsuit in the cutoff. I don't like that play, given that we are playing four-handed and therefore there is less dead money in the middle and limps will become less profitable. So I would fold this because 6-7 offsuit is basically bottom of your range here. Table number 2, we mix in an ISO raise with 8-7 suited. This is not standard, but I think being deep stacked against the fish, you can mix in those plays. We do get called by one player. This flop, not that great. This really hits his limp calling range quite hard. I think we have to go for the check back and hope that we improve our hand on the turn. The King of Hearts is actually quite interesting. You could go for the bluff here in order to make him fold like Jack X or 10X. I think a very, very small bet works here quite often. So I think I would just go for a $8 bet or something like that. Okay, so he snap called the river with 2 pair there. This is a pretty crazy call from him, but I think we missed a bluff opportunity there on the turn. King 10 suited, let me rewind real quick. I did not get the preflop action. Okay, so we limped under the gun and then this guy ISO raised, the button overcalled and we also called. This is standard. And then we flop top pair and face a small c-bet. The button calls here, so at this point I think it is okay to just fold the hand. We will run into super many like ace king, king queen, king jack type hands, and with king 10 it is very tricky to play turns because there are super many turns that we can't continue on, like a 7 or a queen completes jack 10. There is also a flush draw out there, so yeah, I think I would just give this one up. By the way, guys, if you have any feedback regarding this video, if you have any questions, you maybe think I forgot a hand or maybe analyzed a hand poorly, please leave a comment down below this video. Please ask your questions in our Discord server. You did go for the fold here with king 10. I like it a lot. Queen 10 offsuit on the button. You can raise this, you can check this behind. Both options are fine. Seven, 8 and the cutoff, easy limp behind. We have a gut shot and a flush draw here, but still our flush draw is basically worthless, and also the 9 does not make us the nut straight, so I think folding is the correct play. Table number 2, we limp king queen suited under the gun, and again a board we can't do anything on, we have to check fold. This is actually quite aggressive from those guys. Let me see how the money went in there. Remember, this is a limped pot actually. Okay, so it seems like the cutoff decided to bet 80% pot size, and then the button Benji chasing decided to go with a raise. That is fairly aggressive. He had 10-8. I think in a limp pot 10-8 is better as a call on the flop. However, a raise is not horrible because open-enders do have a lot of equity. Then the hijack overcalls, the cutoff goes all in, and Benji chasing calls on the button. Okay, yeah, I guess at this point you have to call with 10-8 given the pot odds. And the hijack then folds. I'm really curious what this guy had. And the cutoff shows pocket sevens. Okay. King 10 suited on the button, easy ISO, especially against the recreational player. This board is very good for our range. I think we can go for a small c-bet. 50% pot size would be my standard here. It is really hard for villain to continue here, given that this board smashes our range. The SPR is like 1.5, something like that. And we are deciding whether we should check, bet, or go all in. Against this player who showed that he's a super calling station, remember this was the guy who called with ace-jack on that 4-card flush board. I think I do not like a jam. I think he will call probably with any ace. The jack also improves his range. He could have jack 10, ace-jack, or king-queen. So I am probably going for the check back. But this time it does work. King 10 offsuit, easy fold against the big under the gun raise. Ace 8 offsuit and the cutoff is a easy limp. And good fold on the turn there. Ace 10 suited, you can go for the limp behind. You can also go for the ISO. I think I'm leaning towards an ISO here, given that the player is a recreational one. This looks like a very good table to me. No wrecks, which is pretty crazy. Table number 1, we limp under the gun with King Queen suited. 3 players limp behind, flop comes down 8-8-6. We have a flush draw. At this point you could go for a bet, but I think the standard play would be to just limp check call, given that it is very likely that one of the players here got an 8, especially cutoff and button have very wide ranges, so they will have a lot of those 7-8, 6-8, Queen 8 type hands. On the turn we do make our flush. At this point we can start betting. You could go for the check raise. The 10 completes 7-9. There's also a couple of 10s in their ranges that do want to bet, like ace 10 or king 10. Maybe even queen or jack 10 with the jack or queen of clubs. I guess queen of clubs is not possible since we blocked that, but yeah. There definitely are a couple of hands that could bet themselves. And then we can go for the check raise. However, betting yourself is probably the standard play. River, you go for the check. Yeah, the question is though if villain is betting a 7. If he does that, then going for the check raise is fine. But I do think that 7x is often checked behind here. And then we lose a lot of value against that hand because a 7 is probably going to call. So yeah, I don't really agree with the check. Queen 9 suited, this is a close one. The cutoff only got 60 antes. I think we have to fold this. If the cutoff was 100 big blinds deep, I think I would go for the call. But at this stack depth, I think we have to fold. You did decide to call, and on this board we are basically done with the hand. If we don't improve to trip 9s here, basically. King 10 offsuit against a 4 anti-open raise and a flat call. This is very close. I think I'm leaning towards folding this hand because King 10 is not the greatest hand multi-way. However, it's probably not a mistake to call this small raise, especially given that these players seem very weak. And we should have a pretty big post-flop edge. Table number 2, we limped king queen in middle position. Flop comes down king jack 6. At this point I would go for the donk bet or the lead. The under the gun player bets 1/3 pot size. This is a very interesting bet size. I'm not so sure what his range looks like for doing this. Maybe pocket jacks in order to induce something. Could also be a hand like pocket queens or ace 10. Yeah, so the question is whether we should raise or call this flop. I think both options are fine. If I raise here and get re-raised, I am folding the hand. But I do think there is some merit into raising, given that we want to protect our hand. There are super many turns that we don't want to see. And there is a bit of value actually against hands like Queen 10 and flush draws. We did decide to go for the call, which obviously is fine. The turn comes the ace, Queen 10 completes. Benji chasing decides to go for the 1/3 pot size again here. At this point we could go for the raise representing King Queen, given that we block Queen 10. However, calling the turn is also fine. So we decide to raise and Benji calls. I'm very curious what hand he could have here. I'm guessing maybe something like ace jack, ace queen, maybe pocket jacks. Yeah, so I think we should go for the shove here. We can represent Queen 10 super good and we want to maximize our fold equity. I think if we bet like 50, we are getting called too often by a hand like pocket jacks, and if we shove, I think that hand has to fold, given how often we got Queen 10 in that situation. So we go for the 50 into 65 and Benji folds. Yeah, I would love to know what hand he had there. So Benji, if you see this, please go ahead and send me a message. Table number 2, we have pocket 10s. We did go for the limp under the gun. 3 players limp behind. Benji chasing decided to go for the pot size ISO raise. And we then called. This is fairly standard. And this is very strange. So usually people are not limping with a strong range in the cutoff when there are already limpers in front of them. So I would not expect the cutoff, this Stano guy, to ever have a strong hand here. I think he's mostly having a suited connector type hand, like 8-9 suited, 10-9 suited, Jack 10. So the question is now, with all this dead money in the middle, do we want to go broke here for 200 antes? Probably not. At the same time, I think we might have a slight range advantage against Stano, and we are like 100 antes deep against everybody else and 200 against this guy. So this is just a variance bomb spot. But yeah, sometimes I think you just have to go with your hand and your read. And yeah, I would probably go all in here. But I guess folding is not a huge mistake. So he actually did it with King Jack. This is like crazy. It's super hard to predict players that make complete nonsense moves. So yeah, we would actually have been in very good shape. They are blocking themselves super hard. And we would have won actually. But that's the thing. Like if you think about it in that situation, if you do have the read that an opponent is never limping behind in the cutoff with a strong range, then pocket tens become very, very good in that scenario. Basically, the worst case is if we are coin flipping, and given all the dead money in the middle, I think coin flipping is very profitable there. Queen 9 on table number 2. I missed the preflop action. Let me go back a bit. So this guy is opening to pot size and we defended. I think this is too loose. I would fold this hand. Queen 9 offsuit has high reverse implieds on if like the board is Queen 10 7 or something. We will run into better queens and overpairs a decent amount of the time. Also, Queen 9 offsuit does not have very good playability, so I think this is a clear fold preflop. As played, we have an easy call on the flop against the 50% pot size c-bet. On the turn, we do make trips, and villain is betting like 10% of the pot. We can go for the shove, we can go for the smaller raise. I would not recommend calling here. I think there are too many rivers that we don't want to see, like an ace or a 9. No, actually a 9 makes us a full house. But yeah, like a king, a jack, an ace, hearts. So I definitely want to raise my hand at this point. The question is, how do we get max value? Jamming or raising to like 26 or something? Really depends on the opponent. I don't mind going all in here. People are very hero stationy, so yeah, we go for the shove and he folds. So we limp 9-10 in the hijack here, and on the flop both under the gun players do check to us. I think at this point we can bet. We have the best hand here fairly often, and we are super happy to take it down. However, checking behind is also okay. It is probably the default play here. And he actually checked kings there. Very surprising. So we avoided losing a couple of antes there. King queen, table number 1. My default is to limp my entire range from middle position. And an easy fold against the 3-bet. Ace 9 in the limp pot. Flop comes down, ace jack 8, and both players check to us. At this point we can go for the bet, we can also go for the check. I think betting is the better option. We make 2-pair on the turn. We bet fairly large. Yeah, regarding bet sizings, I don't see a point for betting that big. Of course, there are a couple of hands that could still call us. But I think my default would just be to bet 2/3 there and not pot size. But bet sizings are very like personal preference, I would say. It also depends a lot on which opponent you're playing, of course. The 10 on the river is a very bad card for us. We have to check behind here. If the opponent leads, we have to fold, of course. And yeah, this was actually it for the first part. Leave a like. See you in the Discord. Good luck at the tables.